Imagine waking up and finding out the tap water you've been drinking your entire life, the water you cooked with, was quietly poisoning you. For decades, the 30,000 residents of Parkersburg, West Virginia, had no idea it was happening. This was a quintessential, tight-knit American river town, and it was completely reliant on one major employer. DuPont built the local schools. They sponsored the Little League teams. For generations, they provided steady jobs for the families here. You trusted the company, and you passed that loyalty down to your children. This deep, inherited trust provided the perfect cover for a disaster that would eventually reach far beyond the borders of Parkersburg. The problem started in 1951, when DuPont began manufacturing Teflon. It was a commercial titan, the miracle coating that lined the cookware of nearly every American kitchen. But producing it required a synthetic processing agent called C8. Look at this molecular structure. C8 is built on a chain of carbon-fluorine bonds. This is one of the strongest chemical bonds in nature. It resists breaking down, meaning external elements simply ricochet off it. The chemical giant 3M actually invented C8, and when they sold it to DuPont, they provided explicit disposal instructions: incinerate it or send it to a licensed hazardous waste facility. They warned DuPont to never flush it into surface water or sewers. But over the next 50 years, DuPont pumped hundreds of thousands of pounds of C8 straight into the Ohio River, the primary drinking water source for the entire region. The indestructibility that made Teflon a commercial success also made its manufacturing waste a permanent fixture in the environment. Once it left the plant, it would never leave the ecosystem. In 1961, DuPont ran secret toxicology tests on the chemical. The results showed low doses of C8 caused severe liver enlargement in rats. By 1970, testing killed 2 dogs within 48 hours. The company buried both reports. Then came the human data. In 1981, they tracked the pregnancies of 8 female plant workers. 2 of the babies were born with severe birth defects. One child, Bucky Bailey, was born with deformities in his eyes and tear ducts, and only a single nostril. Management quietly transferred all women of childbearing age out of the Teflon division. At the exact same time, they circulated an internal memo telling their employees they knew of no evidence linking C8 to birth defects. They possessed hard clinical evidence that their chemical was severely harming human life, and they actively chose to keep manufacturing it. By the mid-1980s, DuPont was secretly sending staff to gather water samples from gas stations and general stores up to 79 miles downriver. Those private tests confirmed C8 had heavily contaminated the public drinking supply. Their priority was legal defense, not public safety. A note found in internal meeting minutes from that exact period outlined their strategy in 8 simple words: do the study after we are sued. The physical consequences eventually surfaced in the late 1990s on Wilbur Temmin's farm. His property sat directly downstream from a DuPont dumping ground. Over several years, more than 190 of his cattle died. Their teeth turned black, they foamed at the mouth, and their internal organs were deformed. Tennant spent hours filming his dying animals and the blackened water running through his creek. He went to local politicians, to government agencies, and town attorneys. No one would take his case. When one corporation controls the local economy, dissent vanishes. The victims are rendered invisible, silenced by the very company that had built their town. Tennant was finally heard when a Cincinnati lawyer named Robert Billet agreed to look at the footage as a favor. Billet was a corporate defense attorney who spent his career protecting chemical companies. He knew exactly how they operated. In 1998, Billet forced DuPont into discovery. The company sent 110,000 pages of internal files. Sitting alone night after night, he read every page, piecing together the hidden blood tests, the covered-up birth defects, and the systematic pollution of the Ohio River spanning 4 decades. Billet's map showed the immediate crisis. C8 had saturated the public water supply for over 100,000 local citizens. But as he analyzed the production volume of the miracle products DuPont sold worldwide, he realized the local river was only the epicenter. Because DuPont used C8 to manufacture goods found in almost every household on Earth, the chemical had migrated through air, water, and the products themselves. This forever chemical is now a biological stowaway. circulating in the blood of 99% of all humans, including you. In 2001, a corporate defense attorney named Rob Bellott did the unthinkable. He took 110,000 pages of internal documents he had gathered from chemical giant DuPont and handed them directly to the EPA. A few months later, he filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of 70,000 people living in West Virginia and Ohio. Every single one of them had been drinking water contaminated with a toxic chemical called C8. Billett was operating with a small team. He was going up against one of the largest, best-funded legal departments in corporate America, armed with nearly infinite resources to delay trials and bury plaintiffs in counterfilings. To the public, the sheer volume of internal memos detailing birth defects and poisoned water seemed like a death blow. Caught with internal proof, the victims were organized, the evidence was secured. But a corporation of this scale does not simply react to a lawsuit. It deploys a strategy designed to shift the very ground the case is built on, activating a highly engineered structural defense to shield the core business from the fallout of its own history. The first stage of this defense emerged in 2004, when DuPont settled the class action. Beyond the $343 million payout, the settlement mandated that DuPont fund an independent scientific panel to determine the exact health risks of the chemical. Researchers spent the next several years drawing blood and collecting medical histories for more than 69,000 residents of the affected area. It became one of the largest human health studies ever conducted in the United States. This chart displays the findings released in 2012. The data proved a probable link between the chemical and 6 specific diseases, including kidney cancer, testicular cancer, and thyroid disease. This data mapped directly onto the lived reality of the community. It explained the severe facial birth defects Bucky Bailey was born with after his mother worked in the Teflon division, and the tumors that decimated cattle farmer Earl Tennant's herd. Armed with irrefutable science, over 3,500 individuals filed personal injury lawsuits. The first few cases went to trial, and juries consistently found DuPont liable, awarding millions of dollars in damages. The strategy to study the problem had backfired. The corporation was now staring down the barrel of thousands of pending trials. Facing a financial liability that had no mathematical ceiling, they executed a drastic pivot. The government's regulatory response offered very little friction. In 2005, the EPA hit DuPont with what was, at the time, their largest administrative penalty ever for hiding the dangers of the chemical. To see how that looks in context, we map that penalty against total earnings. The fine was $16.5 million. DuPont's annual revenue was $26 billion. The government essentially charged them half a day's earnings for decades of concealment. But the individual lawsuits posed a much larger threat. So in 2015, DuPont carved out its chemical operations and spun them off into a brand new company called Chemours. They transferred the vast majority of their legal liability regarding the water contamination directly onto this new, smaller entity. After agreeing to a $671 million global settlement to clear the immediate backlog of claims, DuPont took the final step. In 2017, they merged with Dow Chemical to form an entirely new, massive conglomerate. Through a carefully calculated sequence of settlements, spin-offs, and mergers, they built a firewall. The specific corporate structure that had poisoned the water supply effectively ceased to exist, leaving the liability behind while the core assets moved forward intact. These legal maneuvers focused exclusively on civil settlements and corporate restructuring. Consequently, the accountability remained financial rather than personal. No executive behind the decisions to continue dumping waste ever faced criminal charges or time in prison. And while the corporation restructured, the scope of the damage expanded far beyond the Ohio River Valley. A corporation possesses a unique kind of immortality. It can shed its liabilities, change its name, and engineer an escape on paper. But the chemical it manufactured cannot be erased. It will outlast the boardrooms, the mergers, and the executives, leaving a biological legacy that humanity will carry in our blood for generations.